The Detroit Lions. Let's kick off the NFC North with the Detroit Lions, everybody's favorite team. The Detroit Lions have a lot of work to do, but luckily they have enough money to do some work in free agency. But do they have the pull? You know, a lot of Lions fans are a little bit upset with me because I'm a little bit of an honorable Detroit Lions fan, right? So Lions fans are a little bit upset with me with my predictions for free agency, that I haven't given them all the superstars. I haven't, had them just spend all this money and upgrading all these positions, because I'm not sure, I'm going to be honest with you guys, because I always am, that anybody wants to play for the Detroit Lions. Now, I do think that Dan Campbell helps because he just looks like a character and a good player's coach. So that's probably going to help. But let's start on offense. I think the biggest thing you guys need is wide receivers. And you could definitely look for this in the draft because there's always great receivers in the draft, and this is another year of great receiving options in the draft. But you could also look to free agency with some more, I would look towards the second, third tier of names at wide receiver in free agency rather than the big names. I think the big names like the Godwins, the Odells, the Allen Robinsons are going to look to go, and Mike Williams, those type of guys, they're going to look to go to the best teams and the best, they're going to have 5 or 6 opportunities to go somewhere. So they're not going to pick the Lions. I'm just going to be honest with you. But you've got St. Brown, who I think is going to be one of your 3 starting receivers, and he looks like a promising player. Quintez Cephas is more of a role player, and that's just about everybody you got. Josh Reynolds a free agent. Khalif Raymond's a free agent. So that those guys will be gone. So you're looking for number 1 and number 2 options, in my opinion. St. Brown's like a decent inside receiver, that's that type of thing. So I would look to at least sign one of these guys, and you could probably sign multiple. You could probably sign one bigger name, second tier, and then one low key name. So looking at some of the potential values, Will Fuller is a value. If you want to try to get a number 1 receiver in free agency, that's not going to cost you a ton of money. Will Fuller could be your guy. A lot of teams might be scared of him because of his injury history, but when he plays, he's electric, and he'd open up your offense a ton down the field. You could look at guys like potentially Zay Jones is I feel a solid receiver. And he's kind of in that same lane as Tyrell Williams and Reynolds, who you signed last year, where they're kind of they're kind of number 3, but they're solid. Rashard Higgins is that type of name as well. Cam Sims from Washington is more of a slot receiver, but he's also kind of underrated. And then you've got maybe a Christian Kirk, who isn't going to command a ton of money, but he'll definitely be an upgrade for you. I kind of think he might get too much money, so I might stay away from him a little bit. But I do think there's a lot of options here. I do like Isaiah McKenzie as a lower tier name to target. I like DJ Chark, who's a second tier name who you could spend some money on for a number 1 maybe receiver, or at least a good number 2. Who else? Laquan Treadwell, as I brought up earlier, in the NFC East. He's a guy that really turned it on at the end of last year for Jacksonville, and I think could be a decent number 3 or decent number 2. So he's another kind of diamond in the rough. You've got guys it looks like Michael Gallup's going back to Dallas, so probably not him. Who else? Going through the list. Alan Lazard, obviously, is another low-key name. Valdez Scantling, I would be maybe a little bit tentative there because he might get a lot of money just because of his speed, and I don't think he really offers a ton else in his game. Russell Gage is a great name. That actually feels like a great fit. Russell Gage for he's been really productive in his career. Last year he had 66 catches, 770 yards. He won't cost a ton, but he's solid. Braxton Berrios is younger. Those type of guys. I think they could definitely get 1 or 2 of those guys. Jalen Guyton from the Chargers. I would be looking to that, and then maybe you try to go for a first round or second round receiver, and then that's where you get your number 1 receiver, and then try to aim for a good number 2 in free agency. or maybe even a couple of the lower tier names to partner with St. Brown. Offensive line, I think you're good. I don't think you got to do anything there. You're all signed up across the board. You got Sewell, Decker on the edges, on the tackles, Frank Ragnow in the middle. Vitai's fit in well at guard, so you're good on the offensive line. TJ Hawkinson, you're very good at tight end. It looks like he'll be there for a while. DeAndre Swift, running back's good. Jamal Williams, you also signed. I thought maybe that was a little bit too much money, but you've got your number 1 and your number 2 running backs. Jared Goff, probably going to be the quarterback for one more season, I would think, and then they'll probably move off of him after this year, but you could do a lot worse than Jared Goff. I think he's probably like somewhere in like the 20 to 25 range for the quarterback position, and that a lot of teams would love to have Jared Goff. Like we just talked about Washington, I feel like they'd love to have Jared Goff. Defensively, you've got to do a lot of work, but I do think one area you don't have to do a ton is in the interior defensive line. You've spent a lot of capital already there with McNeil and Levi I can't say his name. Michael Brockers as well, who's a little bit older, but he could still play. Romeo Okwara on the edge. Austin Bryant and Julian Okwara as kind of role players. So you really want to look for, if you're going to spend money, I think it should be for a big-time pass rusher. Now, what I think is going to happen, at least I would be a little bit surprised if they didn't release Trey Flowers, because I like Trey Flowers. I think he's a good player. I could see him actually coming back to New England, but I view Trey Flowers as not exactly the greatest scheme fit in the world. And I do think he's making quite a bit of money. So a way that they could probably move off of him, release him, and then sign somebody that's more of like a pure pass rusher. Because I think Trey Flowers is a good all-around player. He's good against the run. He's good, as a pass rusher on the inside and the outside. But you could really go after maybe like a younger player and a guy that can really get to the quarterback. I'm trying to view the defensive end position, but Randy Gregory could be somebody like that. You could go for Hassan Reddick. Who else? Harold Landry. I think Landry would be a good one, actually. So maybe somebody a little bit younger like that, kind of like just entering their prime, like Reddick or Landry. And I'd probably move off Trey Flowers if it was me. Linebacker, Derek Barnes, if I recall correctly, wasn't bad for you at all. But you do definitely need to upgrade your linebacker position with some speed for sure. And, Anzalone, Reeves-Maben, these guys are all gone. Sean Hamilton might not be a bad re-sign. Anzalone was okay. I think you could re-sign him too. But maybe you add a linebacker. You could go in the draft. You could go in free agency. Like, I've brought up linebacker for a lot of teams. It's seemingly a need for a lot of teams. Secondary, the biggest thing I see is just you need a impact pass rusher for sure. But the secondary could use work. I think you try to get Tracy Walker back if you can, and then maybe look to free safety. I think your starting number 1 and number 2 corners aren't bad. With Okuda, and he hasn't quite hit the hype yet, but maybe he will. You spent a 3rd-round pick on Melon Fonwu, and I think you're okay at cornerback. You could maybe use a veteran in the mix there that could maybe teach these guys. Let's see. So remember, your front office is from the Saints, really. So you're looking for, and Aaron Glenn, I believe, did he coach on the Saints as well? And your coaching staff's kind of from the Saints. So you're looking at guys here. I could see them like going for guys like Darius Williams, who's younger. I could see maybe a value would be Kyle Fuller. Jason Verrett could be a value. Killa Witherspoon's younger. If they want to go corner here, Desmond King actually is probably wouldn't cost a lot, but he's a quality nickel corner if that's what you're looking for. Chandon Sullivan, same sort of thing. Those guys make sense. Mckenzie Alexander as well at nickel corner would make sense. But I think they could spend some money on free safety. If they want to go with Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams makes a lot of sense. Marcus May makes a lot of sense. Even If you want to go a little bit older, veteran route, Anthony Harris could make sense as well. But I think the big target is going to be Marcus Williams. I'm not sure if they're going to get him, but they might try to. And then, like I said, try to get Tracy Walker back. Another guy that's similar to him is Jordan Whitehead, who's also a free agent, if they want to go that way. Quandre Diggs, they could also go for him. So safety and edge rusher would be the two positions I try to upgrade the most. You maybe look to the draft for linebacker. And then offensively, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Just keep hammering wide receiver. And honestly, I mean, the Lions aren't, maybe I'm saying this too much, but I don't think the Lions are that terrible. Like, they've been competitive, and I think it really comes down to the fact that they're good on the offensive line, and they've got a couple pieces that you can work with, and obviously they don't have the quarterback yet, but that's going to come with time. I think Jared Goff's fine for now. He's not going to get you a Super Bowl, but down the road, you could get that quarterback, that next Stafford, so to speak. You know, it was funny because the Lions sort of got Stafford and then they got a team for at least a year or two, and then they never really recovered from there. But I think you spend your most money on the defense, secondary, and edge rusher, and then wide receiver maybe through the draft and add a couple lower key names in free agency. But there's a lot. I think this is a really good free agency to address a lot of the Lions' biggest needs. So that might be, you know, a really big plus. I haven't said that about every team, so that's nice. So the Lions. The Green Bay Packers. Oh boy. The Green Bay Packers. We've got Aaron Rodgers. It looks like Aaron Rodgers is coming back, although can you ever believe anything that Aaron Rodgers ever says? As Charles Barkley says, he is the pretty girl that constantly needs to be reminded that he is a pretty girl. And, you know, Aaron Rodgers, he's a drama queen, but you got to deal with the drama queen when he's that good of a football player. Now, I do think it would be a mistake for the Packers, personally, as good as he is, to pay Aaron Rodgers like $50 million like he wants. I would rather just move on from Aaron Rodgers. I think paying a quarterback $50 million is suicidal. That's just my personal opinion. There's a reason that Tom Brady's won 7 rings and he's only ever been the highest paid player once. So that's just my opinion, especially when you got to re-sign Davante Adams, who is going to be one of the top receivers in the NFL for the next 5 years at least. So Davante Adams, obviously you would love to have Aaron Rodgers back, but if you could trade him, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world. Because your roster is really, really good and you don't have that many needs. And honestly, you could be a dominant team with an average quarterback, given you have a good offensive-minded coach in Matt LaFleur. And you could honestly build a team that is kind of similar to the Niners with Garoppolo, where you're kind of that like really good, but maybe you've got a middle-tier quarterback. Right now, you've got Aaron Rodgers, who's MVP quality. But if it's going to come to $50 million, that just might be too much for me. That's just my opinion. But you look at the offense, I've been saying for at least 5 years that they need a number 2 receiver. They haven't had 2 good quality receivers in years. And they more so need Davante Adams to come back, obviously. But they need a number 2 receiver. And they need somebody that can make plays. And they need somebody that can do some damage. And obviously Valdez-Scantling and who's the other guy? Valdez-Scantling and Alan Lazard and St. Brown are, I believe, all free agents. Maybe you move off of Valdez-Scantling. It feels like he's going to get quite a bit of money here. And he's just not been the number 2 that you've been searching for. So I think Allen Robinson is somebody that might be a little bit cheaper, that's still a very good player that you could get as a number 2 receiver. Will Fuller is the guy that everybody brings up, but it makes a lot of sense because he's basically a better version of Marcus Scantling, and he's going to be cheaper probably. So that makes sense. Maybe you bring in veterans like T.Y. Hilton, Emmanuel Sanders, if you're going to keep Aaron Rodgers. Juju too, if he wants a slot receiver. Who else? You could look for Deshaun Jackson. I mean, if you want to go like 1 year, $3 million for Deshaun Jackson to replace Marquise Valdez-Scantling as your field stretcher, and then bring in like Juju as your slot receiver, that could work too. You could go with DJ Chark would be a good number 2 speed guy. Odell, if Odell doesn't go back to the Rams, Odell would be perfect, right? He wanted to play for Green Bay. That's one of the places that he would probably play. If you got Aaron Rodgers back, Odell would make sense. I don't think you're really in the market for Williams just because I think he's going to be too long of a contract and too big of a contract. I don't think that really makes sense personally. Offensive line is pretty solid. It would be nice to have a better right tackle, but they could definitely use a guard. Lucas Patrick is a free agent. Elton Jenkins, I don't know if they're going to play him at guard or if they're going to play him at tackle. I think guard. So the opposite guard spot, Billy Turner is currently your right tackle. Dennis Kelly's a free agent. You could use a better right tackle, but I don't think you're going to really be able to get one, just given your cap situation. Tight end, Robert Tonyan is almost a must-sign, just given his chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. It would be very nice to have him back. He's also a pretty productive blocker, so they missed him a lot at the end of the year. Having him back would be very nice. A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are great. I still disagree with re-signing Aaron Jones. They should have moved off him for the cap space. Defensively, though, so offensively, guard, probably draft one, and then number 2 wide receiver, Davante Adams, re-sign him, and that's the way to go. Cheap number 2, like a Will Fuller type. And then you've got defensively, Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry. Kenny Clark's a stud. Lowry is kind of like your number 2 guy. But adding some beef in the inside, adding a little bit of depth in the inside would be nice. I don't think you're going to spend a ton of money on this position just because I don't think you have enough money. Obviously, a guy like Akeem Hicks would be amazing, but you're not going to get him. So maybe you go with somebody like Brandon Williams or the hired gun Ndamukong Suh. 1-year contract, like $4 million, something like that. You could go with like Jonathan Hankins if you want to help your run defense on a 1-year contract. Quentin Jefferson's a solid player. Somebody like that, like not super expensive, but just like a nice third option, an upgrade over Tyler Lancaster. They could move off of Za'Darius or Preston Smith. I really like Rashawn Gary. I think he's very underrated. And I would like to keep Whitney Merciless on a 1-year deal. I thought he was good for them. It would be nice to keep Za'Darius Smith, but I think you got to probably get rid of one of these guys. There's too much money invested in this position alone, and you've got to spend that money on Devondre Campbell, who was so good for you, and you've got to have him back. Safeties and corners are good. I don't even have to say anything. Eric Stokes is going to get better. It would be nice to have Sullivan back. But Douglas could also, I feel like, play that role too. If Sullivan leaves, Douglas could play the nickel spot, and Alexander will be back. So, I mean, you're good. Maybe you add like a corner in like the late draft, like 4th round, 5th round for a younger guy. But when I look at the Packers, man, they're Super Bowl ready if they get Aaron Rodgers back and they get Davante Adams back. And then all they've got to do is find a number 2 receiver, and they've got to find depth on the D-line, re-sign Devondre Campbell, and you're good to go. Now, some of that is probably going to come with like letting go of Preston Smith. You're going to probably have to get some money. You're probably going to have to do some restructuring with Za'Darius Smith. But you can manage your way there and get your way there. So I think the Packers, man, free agency, they're never huge in free agency. They're bigger in the draft. But finding a number 2 receiver, getting your important pieces back is essential. And this is going to be more so, once again, this year, a team that does their work through the draft. All right. The Chicago Bears. I think Adams is going to be back if Aaron Rodgers is back. Just to comment on Tyler World's comment there. I don't see why Adams wouldn't want to be back if Aaron Rodgers is back. But I could be wrong, I guess. Maybe he's just paid so much money that it's just overwhelming. Okay. Da Bears are up next. And actually, Bears have quite a few free agents on both sides of the football that were starters for them a year ago. I'm just counting it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 starters listed on our lads that are free agents. So let's start on offense. And you have Justin Fields. At least quarterback isn't a concern for next year. We still don't know what Justin Fields is, but he showed enough upside for us to believe in him and to try to go all in on him for the next couple of years. So Justin Fields is your answer at quarterback. Nice. You've got David Montgomery at running back, and Herbert's not bad either. So you got your running back position. Wide receiver, Allen Robinson's a free agent. He'll be gonzo. Darnell Mooney might be your number 1 receiver moving forward, but it would be nice to add a number 2. Personally, I'd probably go young through the draft, somebody to pair with Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney to have a nice young core of wide receiver, quarterback, running back, which is what you have with David Montgomery, Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney. That would be really good if you could add another guy through the draft, second, first round, high priority draft pick. Offensive line is where you could maybe spend some of your money. I think James Daniels would be amazing to have back as he's a very good player, but he might get a lot of money elsewhere, so that might be difficult. Jason Peters, if he wants to come back, would be a short-term solution at least one of the tackle spots. Played very well last year. He's just so good. He's a Hall of Famer. If he wants to play one more year, sure, why not? Tevin Jenkins, though, you spent a high pick on him. Is he going to come through? I'm not sure. But you definitely need to look at the tackle position. That's a must draft or a must sign. And I definitely think, given the Bears, they've got $26 million, which is quite a bit. So they could look to sign one of the big name tackles. They might be in the Orlando Brown, Trent Brown, Teron Armstead business. If they don't go that way, they could go for a cheaper alternative like Cornelius Lucas or Eric Fisher. Those guys would definitely be an upgrade at either tackle spot. And then you're probably counting on Jenkins playing at least one of those tackle spots. So I think that's the way you're going to go. Center could use an upgrade as well. But I think it's mostly, if you're going to spend big money, it feels like it will be on a tackle or a wide receiver. Komet's your tight end. That's fine. Defensively, Akeem Hicks might be on his way out. He's getting a little bit older. I think it's fine to let him go, although he is a very good player. And with your whole defensive scheme change, he doesn't really fit the defense as well as he did previously. But Eddie Goldman's still there, and Bilal Nichols is pretty good. I'm not sure if he's going to be back. But I definitely feel like with the new coaching staff, they're going to want to get faster on defense, and they're going to want to have speed off the edge, and definitely going for guys like, a little bit more wiry, like Randy Gregory types to pair with Khalil Mack. Robert Quinn was actually really productive, so he probably is just going to maintain that spot. Honestly, last year he was really good. So is Khalil Mack. So you got those two guys on the edge. Maybe you get younger at that spot through a draft pick. Roquan Smith is your number 1 linebacker. Danny Trevathan is fine as the number 2, I feel like, although he gets hurt a lot. So that's not a high priority need. But if Akeem Hicks leaves, maybe you go with more of a pass rush first type of interior guy. So let's just check some of the options here. Like my favorite one to give for every team is DJ Jones. Larry Ogunjobi kind of fits that mold. Jerron Reed kind of fits that mold. Malik Collins. Who else? Quentin Jefferson's solid. Tyquan Lewis from the Colts, who could play edge or inside, where obviously your coach was before. And I definitely see secondary as a huge need. I feel like secondary has been a need ever since the whole Kyle Fuller and Bryce Callahan left. That was huge. So Jalen Johnson's good, and Eddie Jackson's good. But I definitely look at safety and corner needs an upgrade. But in this system, it's more so finding like zone players. So maybe you go with like Xavier Rhodes, who used to play in that system for Indianapolis as a short-term solution, and he's been good and kind of undervalued in that spot. If you want to go with those type of guys, it would make sense. The draft could also be a place that you target as well, the secondary spots. But my biggest areas of addressing have to be the tackle position, wide receiver. You want to get Justin Fields in a comfortable position, and you really want to find out if Justin Fields can be your franchise. So the highest priority should be wide receiver and tackle, period. Then, okay, our secondary needs are, let's make this defense a quality defense in this scheme. And you've got a few players, like you've got Jalen Johnson at corner, you've got Eddie Jackson at safety, you've got Khalil Mack off the edge, you've got Eddie Goldman in the middle, you've got Roquan Smith at linebacker. Like, with those pieces at every level, you're not going to be bad no matter who fills the other spots. So I would really just be looking to maybe add some values at every other spot to fill in on defense, and really spending your big money on offense, because that's where it really needs some work. But yeah, they're getting a little bit older on defense. They're young on offense. But I think that the Bears, it's going to be interesting. But I definitely think going all in on Justin Fields on offense is the way to go. So that's the Chicago Bears. And then let's finish off the NFC North with the Minnesota Vikings. So the Minnesota Vikings, let's just check here. Minnesota's going to be interesting. I think in this kind of weaker NFC, it's going to be interesting to see what approach they take moving forward, because they have a new coach in Kevin O'Connell, new front office. Okay. So, the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk Cousins should remain your quarterback. As much as I would like him to maybe take a cheaper contract, it just doesn't feel like he's ever going to want to do that, which sucks. So I think you're going to have to wait until Kirk Cousins leaves in order to go cheaper at quarterback. But Cousins is a good enough quarterback where he's in the top 12, I would say, where he's worth keeping. Justin Jefferson's arguably the best receiver in the NFL, so you don't got to worry about that. And then you have Adam Thielen, who's still good. So you've got your number 1 and your number 2. And KJ Osborne is a nice, cheap number 3 option that I think should remain that way. So you got 3 receivers that can do some damage. But I will say, Kevin O'Connell comes from the Rams. So he's going to want to have a lot of good receivers, and they like to run 3 receiver sets. So Thielen, Jefferson, Osborne, and then you might look to add a veteran as well to pair up just to add some depth, right, to this receiving core. And I really think this offense could shift to a little bit more pass heavy with Cousins, and just because you have Justin Jefferson. So I think they could shift a little bit more pass heavy than they were with Zimmer and company and Kubiak, but they're still going to maintain that zone run scheme, which is good because they have Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison and a zone offensive line. So their offensive line's in better shape than it was before, because they've got Christian Darrisaw, who's a young answer at left tackle. Brian O'Neill is a solid right tackle. They could use some work at guard, but I don't think it's pressing because all of these guys are signed. So you could use your money elsewhere, right? Their cap situation also isn't very good. So they're looking at cheap options. Probably Tyler Conklin is going to leave, although I'd like for him to stay. He kind of does remind me of Tyler Higbee. So I feel like Kevin O'Connell could use him in that way, but you're getting, is it Irv Smith back? You're getting Irv Smith back, Irv Smith Jr., who actually looked like he was going to break out last year, but he's going to be back from injury. So you're not really, it would be nice to have the nice number 1, number 2 kind of tight end options of Tyler Conklin and Irv Smith, but I don't know. CJ Ham's also there for a fullback. I'm not sure if they're going to end up keeping him because they don't really use fullbacks very much in LA. So we'll see if they move off of him maybe. The Vikings defense, I think, needs a lot of work. I've heard rumors that Eric Kendricks, they could move Eric Kendricks. I think that would be a huge, terrible decision, because I think Eric Kendricks is your just heart and soul of your defense at this point at middle linebacker. And their defense is going to be like sort of Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio based. So having that nice middle linebacker that can cover, I think is huge. If you have it, you've got some big guys in the middle with Pierce and Tomlinson. That's fine. You might be paying Pierce too much money, which maybe you move off of him or try to restructure. But I think Dalvin Tomlinson is fine. You need another edge rusher opposite Danielle Hunter. Hunter is going to be great. And he's young still, which is awesome, but you need somebody on the other side. That might come through the draft because of the money situation. Anthony Barr is going to be gone. That's fine. Nick Vigil, same thing. That's fine. So Eric Kendricks is going to be essential, unless you just want to totally punt the linebacker position like the Rams have and just go totally cheap at that position and then try to build your secondary and your pass rush. Maybe you do that, but I personally wouldn't. The secondary, Peterson should be gone. I think you could keep Mckenzie Alexander if you like. Xavier Woods you could keep if you want. He was okay. Cameron Dantzler, he might be fine in this system. But you definitely need help at corner, so that could be a draft first round sort of priority. That has been something that they've been missing for years in Minnesota. But there are options like Bryce Callahan and Kyle Fuller who have actually played under your defensive coordinator. That would make a lot of sense. And maybe even somebody like Chris Harris at nickel. But I think Mckenzie Alexander would be fine. So the defense, biggest priority is corner to me, and then edge rusher, and maybe restructuring some of the guys like Michael Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson to hopefully creating some more cap space for you. Harrison Smith, how much longer is he going to be there? But I view the Vikings as a team, given that they have the quarterback, they have a running back, they have a receiver, they've found a left tackle, they've got a couple playmakers on defense. Like, this should be about a playoff team next year. And I think Kevin O'Connell's going to make this offense better. So I think I like the direction, but their defense needs to get younger and just continue to build with what you have on offense. And really, I think the offense improvement mostly comes from the coaching more than anything. So defense, get some younger players, but offense, maybe you add a veteran or two. All right, so those are the Minnesota Vikings. And that is the NFC North.